your
This
summer to
conference will
help me with
now
my
be
project.
recorded.
I really appreciate it.
Not a problem.
So, a little bit of background on my project. I am doing a 4 episode YouTube series about the power of influencers. So, pretty much each episode has like its own like kind of topic that will have its own questions and stuff like that. So, episode 1 is really talking to the history of influencers and how they really rose in popularity. Episode 2 talks about the secrets that influencers keep. So pretty much, what are the things that influencers do that they don't want their followers to know, such as
Okay.
like buying, engagement or buying followers. Episode 3 is what is it about influencers that draws us in. So
Okay.
what is it that makes people want to follow influencers and look to them for their opinions? And then episode 4 is how are influencers changing the way that society thinks, buys, interacts online, and dresses.
Okay.
So pretty much what I'll do is I'll just go question by question and then I'll just call it what episode it's for. And then we'll probably get through these in like 10, 15 minutes, to be honest. It's pretty quick.
Okay.
Great. All right, so we're going to start with episode 1 question. So, why do you think Instagram influencers have gained so much traction in the last 3 years?
I think part of it is because they seem organic. I think much of the appeal of the influencer is that they seem like you and me. They seem
Hmm.
accessible. So if you think about people who are like makeup influencers, right? If you're a young woman and you see someone who is willing to show you what she looks like before and after, and you begin to think, well, I can do that. Or you think about another area that most people don't think about, like video games. If you see somebody playing a video game giving strategies, you suddenly start to think, well, I can do that as well. And so I think that organic nature of it, plus the platform on which much of it is taking place, Instagram, YouTube, so on and so forth, has really allowed it to grow.
How have influencers really gained so much popularity?
Well, I mean, part of it is just a youth-driven market. And I think also people looking for something that doesn't seem like a commercial, even though we know that influencing pretty much is just that. But I think it got off because there were initially so few guidelines and rules about it before the FTC stepped in and sort of said, hey, you have to mark out when you're doing advertising. So it just seemed like you were having this natural conversation or getting glimpses into the lives of people whom you already liked that
Mhm.
suddenly allowed them to sort of, again, grow in popularity.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So, episode 2 questions. Do you believe the influencers are being honest with their followers?
um, to varying degrees, of course. I think, again, part of the big concern about them initially, of course, was about that honesty. You couldn't ever really tell when they were selling you something, or if this, again, was something that was just a natural thing that they consume. So I, for example, did a research project before on Richard Sherman, a football player for then the Seattle Seahawks. And one of the things that sort of got him into trouble was that he wasn't really ever making it clear when he was selling a product or when he was just sort of saying, hey guys, I use this. And so I think those things are really, again, are still being hashed out.
What are some tricks that influencers use to gain more followers, likes, and comments?
Well, again, initially, just the idea that they just were using these products themselves. We know behind the scenes that they're buying influencers. Um, I mean, buying sort of followers. There's also this really strong network, right? So if you follow one person, then it usually leads to you following another, and so on and so forth. I was really not previously aware of how much of a network behind the scenes that there was. Until recently, in some of my students, we even mentioned, so if you follow somebody, then you have to follow somebody else, and so I think those things have just allowed it to continue.
So that was great. All right, so episode 3. What is it about Instagram influencers that draws people into following them?
Again, I think not to sound like a broken record, but again, I think just the natural um, appearance of it. And again, the growth of Instagram as a platform. So, for example, the idea that once Instagram went live, I think that really allowed it to grow. And you can see other platforms trying to catch on with that.
Mhm.
Snapchat, of course, was sort of probably first and foremost. Facebook is trying to capture on that sort of liveness, but it's not really doing such a great job. So I think the youth driven notion, nature of Instagram, I think the liveness, again, the idea that a the strongest market for selling people for selling things is always sort of that sort of 13 to 18 demographic, and they are on Instagram more than anything else, and they are waiting to consume products. So it was just the match made in heaven.
Absolutely. Why are brands opting to work with influencers for marketing purposes rather than using a traditional celebrity?
So I think again part of it is that accessibility. Kendall Jenner can't sell everything,
Hmm.
even though she's doing remarkably well. But again, I think it's just that some people really want to see a bit of themselves in the product, which is also leading to the rise of, well, the increase in number of influencers, right? The idea that, hey, I too can do this, I think
Hmm.
is really contributing to.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that. All right, so episode 4. How are influencers changing the way that society thinks, interacts online, shops, engages with others?
Well, I think we a lot oftentimes we sort of overestimate their influence. So to some degree, obviously, they are having a great influence on a certain demographic.
Hmm.
And again, it's easy to point to things like makeup influencers, for example. I think they are having the most impact. But I don't think people are necessarily shying away from traditional media. But again, I think the other thing is that there is a core demographic of people, particularly young people and young adults, who just are not engaging with traditional media in the ways that people my age often are. And so, they now have people who want to sell something now have these platforms in which to engage with a whole host of people who are otherwise skipping commercial content for all intents and purposes. If you think about it, something like Netflix allows sort of you to consume a product, a sitcom, a movie, whatever the case may be, without any commercial interruptions whatsoever. Whereas Instagram is suddenly becoming a commercial. A parallel to think about real quickly is I often uh, point out to my students how back in the day MTV would show you a whole bunch of videos, and
Hmm.
videos are not art. They may be artistic, but their videos are advertisements. And if you don't think of them that way, then you'll just sit there and watch them all day. And that's the thing that's happening with influencers. You don't think of them necessarily as advertising, and so you just sit there and watch and go down the rabbit
That's a great, great analogy. I like that. I like that a lot. Why do you think social media companies like Facebook are making changes to their algorithms based upon, influencers and the power that they have?
so you can't divorce that from what Facebook and the like want to do anyway, which is make sure that you never leave the site. So if you think about things like endless scrolling, the idea that your feed never stops. Um, Influencing is the same way, right? If you watch one video, then you might want to see another one. So they're just trying to keep you on those sites. Now it'll be interesting to see how much of that continues, especially since people are beginning to target social media for just that, right? The idea that you're just people just can get on there and never leave. But I think that's obviously why everyone's trying to get to the game, right? Just to make sure that people who are otherwise apt to skip out on traditional media are coming in to watch, social media more.
Do you think that influencers have too much power in today's world?
That's an excellent question. Um, I think they have the potential, and that's not even necessarily in terms of their ability to influence per se. As much as I think what's happening is that they are creating an environment where everybody wants to be an influencer. And
Hmm.
so what's beginning to happen is the market is getting saturated with people who say, "Hey, I can do this too." And so, we've seen. I don't know if you know about the case with the young woman. I think her name is Ari.
Hmm.
who had 2 million, followers or whatever the case may be, but couldn't even really move her own T-shirt product. And so it sort of shows that there are some shortcomings to that market, right? One, the idea that the influencer can't really branch and become an entrepreneur on, for herself or himself, but also that there's just so many of them, and I think that's the biggest sort of problem that we're encountering now.
Entirely. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all.
You did awesome. Good job.
Appreciate it.
I'll
Thank you.
start